in spirit. We ask you to guide our path for our city and all the people and residents that are in the city. We ask that you give us new life where we're calm and we do the right thing for all the residents. For this we thank thee. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Mr. Licari with roll call, please.
Mayor Scott Tremblay,
Here.
Vice Mayor William Dittmer,
Here.
Councilwoman Jenny Sorrell,
Here.
Councilman Terrence Rowe. Let the record show that Councilman Rowe is absent. City Attorney James Matthew.
Here.
City Manager Vincent Lupo.
Here.
I'd like to approve council minutes.
Motion to approve minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, I'd like to take comments from the general public, and I'd like to start with Claudia Smith.
Claudia Smith, 7335 Candlelight Court.
Thank you, Ms.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
The CAC cleaned Nix Park a week or two ago, and I have two comments about Nix Park. Number one of the parking areas charges $5, and there's another one that charges $10. The city doesn't charge nothing. And I know it's been looked at several different times, but I really think we need to get serious about it and do either some sort of kiosk or something, because they're making income, and I would like to see people that are from outside of Port Richey pay, I don't know, $3, I don't care. But the people that are in city in Port Richey and use it, pay some sort of $20 for the year and get an emblem where they can use it more freely. I think that would be fair. The second thing that we noticed about Nix Park, one of the ladies on the committee, Caitlin, there were a lot of cigarette butts everywhere. And there's nowhere to put them. So they're just throwing them on the ground. I think there was something out there, I was told at one point, and for whatever reason, I don't know if they were vandalized, stolen, who knows. But I was hoping that we could figure out something to be able to put out there, because trying to clean it, as we will continue to do, and the city trying to pick up every little butt is a pain. And there's no guarantee that the public will put it there, but if you have it, they don't have an excuse. That's the only things I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Just 1 second on that.
Yes.
Vince, you can tell me on this. I think at one time we were restricted on making fees at Nix Park, but that is passed now, correct?
I believe that to be true.
So
but
we
we'll
can proceed
But
with-
we'll research it. At one point in time, for the general public, at one point in time, because we had used grant money to rebuild the dock, we were prohibited from charging for the use of that dock, that facility. But we'll research it, and I believe that restriction has by this time run out. But I'll report back to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person up to the podium, please, Thomas Brown.
I have nothing to say.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
This couldn't help you, someone.
Did you want to comment on anything? The next person on the list is Keith Allen. To the podium, please. Hi, Mr. Allen.
Keith Allen, 7804 Grand Boulevard, Port Richey 34668. I have only one word to say, Pithla-Chascody.
Pithla-Chascody.
Okay. I'm a new resident here in Pasco County since April of this year, after being a resident of Palm Beach County since 1996. And I have a letter to read here about the living conditions at the Grand Efficiency Motel. Yesterday I met Sergeant Angel Russo, who suggested that I show up here tonight and direct my comments to Sal Licari regarding the living conditions at the hotel. On June 12th, I paid $420 to Grand Motel for efficiency unit number 52. I am traumatized when I awaken in the morning to view the condition of my rental. This place reminds me of a haunted house I once was in. Could somebody please explain to me what is happening in America now that it seems to be on a path of imminent destruction and affordable housing is impossible to find? I'm a retired and disabled citizen, and the last year I've had many difficulties trying to find a place to live, and the main obstacle has been the credit score. I have been renting for 45 years, never having to pay more than $425 a month. I am now paying twice that amount, and this is the scariest place I have ever been in. How does that make any sense? How do you justify $30 a day for these appalling conditions? I should be living in luxury for this price. This place is not even worth $10 a day. Would you live in this squalor without complaining? Of course, this letter is directed to the management of the hotel. And tomorrow, I'm presenting this letter to them. This is a motel. There's no maid service or recycling program or laundry facilities or Wi-Fi or internet service. There is a health issue with the stove. I'm afraid to cook anything. Have you seen the underside of the hood vent? It needs to be replaced. There are visible termite droppings falling out of the ceiling. I already killed a few roaches. The front door frame is in need of repair. I can see daylight around the frame of the air conditioner. There are no fixtures in the bathroom. The toilet plumbing is leaking. There's too much visible filth. There are no drapes on the window. There's no sconce on the ceiling lights. The TV remote is dysfunctional. The kitchen sink is leaking. The refrigerator is like a rocking chair. And what is that foul odor? And can it be stopped? What am I breathing? It smells like vomit. This place is unsanitary. I fear for my health. If I were to make an educated guess, then there may be enough violations for any health, safety, or building inspector to have the place shut down or condemned. This place is not fit for human habitation. Also, someone needs to call animal control. There are too many feral cats living on the property. I can smell the offensive odor whenever I open my front door. The management seems to be ignoring the problem. So I would like to deliver this letter to the council members here. I also have some information here regarding the credit score. I'm not going to read that because I have 15 seconds left, but I'd like to deliver this to, perhaps maybe it'll have a positive impact upon the country in which I live. Because the credit score is ruining my ability to find affordable housing. My opinion is that the credit score is a very dangerous policy, and it should be shipped out to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and sunk to the bottom of the sea where it belongs.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And Mr. Sal, if you would, please.
Thank you very much.
Mr. DeCanio, Chief?
Well, I couldn't agree with him more. We've been out there, we've had the building department out there, we've had the fire department out there, we've had the state out there. I was speaking with Pasco County Code Enforcement, asked them for some help. Just today, I got a letter from the county's attorneys, and they cannot come into the city and enforce the county regulations. Building officials been out there, fire department's been out there. I know there's a bed bug infestation out there. That's, according to the state, that's not a reason to close them down. The state doesn't regulate the cleanliness of a particular individual in a room. So we've been out there. They're on our radar, and we're doing everything we can legally. We just can't go there and placard the building and shut them down.
So I'll hold it there temporarily. I'm section, number 3 on the waiting list for Section 8 housing down at the Meridian apartment building down in St. Petersburg. So that's going to be my saving grace in the event that they call me soon, because I can't get out of this place quick enough. I'm not accustomed to living in this kind of squalid conditions. I have very high standard, and I'm very clinically clean about the place in which I live, and I'm even afraid to touch anything in the place.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. The next person that I wanted to call to the podium was Leonard Lord.
Congratulations again, Mayor. Evening, everyone. Leonard Lord, I pastor at 8114 Leo Kidd Avenue. A couple of things coming up. You know, we do our annual backpack giveaway. Some of you have helped us here. Mr. Priest, I think, got almost $700 from business people one time. We get backpacks complete for $9.25. We plan to have better than 300 ready to give away. And I really want to thank the fire department, the police department. They've been very instrumental. The fire department, the fire trucks, has just been a blessing, those children, when they see that. But just to give you a kind of a picture of it, we'll start registering at 9 o'clock. We'll have a giveaway at 10, giveaway at 11, a giveaway at 12. At 11 o'clock, we have somebody come in with a big cooker and do a barbecue. And so you can go inside the fellowship hall, because Port Richey doesn't have a civic center. So we fixed our church up, our fellowship hall for that. Some of you have been there. And so you're all invited to come and meet the people and have a free meal. I know Nancy Britton's come on quite a few occasions. Will and his wife's been to a couple of them. And so we just invite you to come. And if any of you want to help with that, your finances will be helpful. If anybody donates over $100, we will stuff their business card, if they would like, in the backpack so they could see who helped do that. So that will be July 27, 9 o'clock. Lord willing, we plan to have the bounce house and the water slides, as well as some music and things going on. It'd be great to see all of you there. It's just a time to get the kids back to school. And the good news is, one time at the fire station, we had to have 3 prayer rooms. We say, how about we pray for your children and teachers for a good year, and nobody turns us down. So it's just a great day, and it's, you know, we give out our last ones at 12, so it's not an all-day thing. So appreciate the city, and I hope, Chief, that it works out for the department again. Also, in November, somewhere between the 1st and Thanksgiving, we do what's called Cure Fest. We like to partner with government. Most of our things comes from senior nutrition with Pasco County Meals on Wheels. They may see a widow that needs her house painting or some things done or yard work. And so I know there's always been the question of liability. We do have forms to fill out. We've never had a problem. Somebody Cures Tampa Bay partners with Tampa, St. Pete, have done it for years. It's a day that those that love the Lord just come out on a Saturday together to just help bring the community up. So remember that, and we did that for years in the parks and things. So Lord bless you, and thanks again, Mayor, and everybody, and if we can help, give us a call. Lord bless you and thank you. Those are the 2 things coming up, okay?
Thank you,
Lord
Mr.
bless
Lord.
you. Thank you very much, and I do have to go. Excuse me.
Comments from the city manager?
Yes, Mayor, Council, there are several things I'd like to speak to as quickly as possible. We're scheduling a fall cleanup for the 2nd and 3rd week of September. The first part will be drop-off. That'll be in the 2nd week of September. And the 3rd week of September, we will come out and pick up some of the items. We will have some brochures printed up and distributed so that you can all understand exactly what you can bring out and what we will pick up. And we'll also have that on our website. So again, that's the 2nd and 3rd week of September. The dog park is now available. It's not fully open. We're waiting for the delivery of a special gate to aid handicapped ADA and any other individual who can use access from the bike and hike trail. However, they can have access through the main entrance to the dog park, and that dog park will now be open. 3 specific projects that I know many of the citizens are interested in. First of all, the median on 19. The median project will be started sometime in July. The Washington Street project is scheduled for July 8th to begin with the repairs to Washington Street. And Orange Grove is scheduled for the 26th of July. Nothing has changed. We've had some unfortunate issues with respect to some complaints about brownish or colored water. We have found that there has been some brown water trapped in a couple of our transmission lines. We have now flushed those lines completely 2 separate times. What you see in front of me are samples of waters from the various fire hydrants at the extremities of our community, all the way out. And this water is absolutely pure and drinkable. No odor, no adverse taste, no adverse smells, to your good health. And to that, I would like to explain to the general public that we conduct tests on our water. We send 13 different samples to an independent testing laboratory, and they check for discoloration, they check for coliform, they check for residual chlorine. So it is independently tested and is sent to the county on a regular basis, minimum of once a month, but we do our tests in-house. So we are absolutely assured of the quality of the water, and we will be publishing a water quality statement in the very, very near future for all the public to read and see. With respect to water problems, if you have any discolored water, or feel that you do, or feel that you have a problem with respect to that, please call the telephone number, our general telephone number. It is 727-816-1900, and then extension 2. We will take your issue and we will respond to it as quickly as possible. That same phone number can be used for anyone who has a concern about their water bill. We are recently in the process of transitioning from a hard read to a meter, computer meter read. And during that transition, we have had several difficulties. We are working diligently to resolve those issues. And if there is an issue or a specific problem, please call that number, and we will again get with you to try and provide you any documentation or information, or go out and do an inspection if necessary, to ensure that the numbers and the amount that you're going to pay is accurate. You may not like the number because you may be overwatering your lawn, there may be a leak, there may be a break, but whatever it is, we'll attempt to resolve the issues. And we'll do a complete report and analysis for you. We want to make sure that anyone who utilizes our water is comfortable with what they're drinking and that they're being charged a fair and equitable rate. This community, this city council has not increased water rates for over 3 years now, when we were supposed to, at one point in time, increase rates by 4 or 5% per year. We've made vast strides so far, and we intend to keep going down that road. And that basically, Mr. Mayor, is all that I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Lupo. Are there any comments from the council?
Well, first I'd like to congratulate you on your victory,
Thank you.
and we're all happy that you're here. Another question, I think Vince kind of just addressed, I know there are a few complaints of really strange water bills,
Yes, sir.
so.
As I said, if they would simply call that number, we will produce the kind of documents that are necessary so that you can understand what has occurred on your property and why. We are responsible for everything up to your meter. Past the meter, that is your responsibility, and you need to contact your own plumber to ascertain what is the problem. But from the meter back, that is our concern, and we will make sure that in fact that meter is proper, is working properly, and therefore if there is an abundance of usage due to a specific problem on your side of the meter, where you'll be charged for water usage because the water does go through the meter, we can make arrangements to make sure that you won't have a full charge for the disposal of that water on the other end. So please, if you have a problem, call that number, contact us, and we'd be more than happy to work with you. That number, again, is very specific to this issue. It's extension 2 of our phone number, and 1900.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
I am really grateful to hear that the city is willing to work with anybody who has a water bill problem. Please let the city know. We can't work with you if you're going to not tell us. So please let people know that they can call, they can come to the city will work with you. And thank you, Mr. Lopo, for letting everyone know that.
Are there any other comments from council? Okay. At this time, I want to move on to the agenda.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
If we can move on to council business. The first item on the agenda is presentation of comprehensive annual financial reports.
Mr. Powell?
Thanks.
It was Richard Powell of Powell and Jones. We are the auditors of the city. Just quickly, we performed field work in your office sometime earlier. Your staff, with the assistance of your consulting CPA, prepared the CAFR report.
Can you bring the mic up a little closer?
Oh,
so
yes,
that people-
sure, I'm sorry. Alright. Okay, and we reviewed it, and your interim finance person reviewed it, so it's been reviewed, so this is a formal presentation. I promise I won't review all 92 pages. I'll try to go to what I
Thank you.
consider the most important. I know that always brings smiles. So I'll go first to page 1 and 2 is the audit opinion. It states it's a complete audit of the city conducted in accordance with applicable auditing standards, which include the financial auditing standards, the government auditing standards. So there's 2 levels of required audit procedures. What you seek in an audit is a clean, unmodified opinion, and you have that highest level of assurance, which is a good reflection on the quality of the financial records and practices of the city. The next section, called Management's Discussion and Analysis, is some required overview information on the city, but due to the fact that that is derived from the financial statements, I will ask that you read that on your own, and I'll go directly to the pertinent financial statements. The first one being on page 22. The city, being a government, operates under governmental fund accounting principles. So there are 2 types of funds. There's the governmental funds, which is the general, the community redevelopment, capital improvement. There's 3. And then you have your enterprise funds, your business type funds, which are the water and sewer utility and the stormwater utility. So it's a straightforward arrangement. So on page 22 is a balance sheet of your governmental funds, the general fund being the main, most important fund. So the total assets at the end of the year were $4,064,000 and $4,064,426. Total liabilities were $649,704. The fund balances are cash reserves. Your total fund balances were $3,375,123. You have various, if you look at that, the bottom of 22, various restricted accounts within that $3.4 million. But if you look at the last one, that is the unassigned general fund balance. That's the unrestricted fund balance contingency fund of the city under the city council, which was $1,201,812. Now, I always compute how much of general fund expenditures that would pay for, and it is right at 3 months. And so I encourage the cities to get that maybe up a little higher. 3 to 6 months is a good level for that reserve, but you're right at the 3-month level. The next statement on page 24 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances of these funds. So in this year, the total revenues were $5,602,675. Total expenditures were $5,950,516. So in this year, you had excess expenditures over revenue of $347,841, which reduced that fund balance by around almost about 8%, down to the $3,375,123. And so I remember I looked kind of at your budget actual, and that was programmed to spend in that range, that you actually underspent the budget, so it was a planned. Okay, and so the next statement on page 26 is the equivalent statements for your enterprise funds. Now, enterprise funds, the intent of an enterprise fund is to operate strictly off user charges, so you don't have to prop up your expenditures with general revenues. So it uses business accounting principles. So the balance sheet is referred to as a statement of net position. So, and you have substantial assets in these funds because you have the heavy infrastructure assets. So your total assets were $13,264,241. The total liabilities were $3,762,163. So the net position is like the net worth of these two funds, and it's almost $10 million, $9,607,987. So you have substantial equity in these funds. And the net position is like, again, the net worth. And so again, if you look at the unrestricted net position, it's kind of like that unassigned general fund balance, and that's 3 numbers up from the bottom, the third column, $1,493,265. Now, in it represents about 5 months of your enterprise fund expenditures, so it's at a healthy level. Okay, the next statement on page 27 is your statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. And again, your revenue, which is good, the only revenue you really have in here, operating revenue, are your user charges, $3,575,233. The total expenses, $3,406,908. And again, because this is under business accounting principles, you include depreciation, which in this year was $501,000. And so after the non-operatings and transfers in and out, the bottom line here is that you were positive $141,011, which means in this year you fully covered your cash outlay of your cash expenses, plus you fully covered depreciation, so that would be a successful year for your enterprise funds. On page 28, and to kind of show you that although the statement of cash flow, I say, kind of shows the change in your checkbook of these funds, and that so while your you could say your profit, your change in net position is positive $141,000, the cash in your accounts actually increased $455,000. And again, that's mainly because depreciation isn't a cash expense. So you actually not only operated positively, but you increased your cash balance by almost $500,000. So I would say that's a successful year. After that are notes and disclosures, just a few of them I like to look at. On page 40 is a table that shows your capital assets. These are your fixed assets. and again, ranged into governmental and business type. And so for with governmental activities at cost, they're at $14,675,560. The accumulated depreciation, $6,378,797. The net assets, $8.3 million. So that tells you two things. Number one, your assets are about 44% depreciated, which of the cities and counties I see, that's probably slightly above average. You know, average now is getting close to 50, so you're newer than that. But also you have $6.4 million in accumulated depreciation that is a cost, but it's unfunded, basically unfunded, and everyone has that, but it's just something, it's a reason to maximize and increase reserves when you can. The next, on page 41, is the equivalent table for your enterprise funds. Here again, the assets are substantial, $19,230,400. Depreciation, $9,329,291. So net assets, basically almost $10 million. So these assets are about 50% depreciated. So I'd put that kind of in the average area. So your enterprise, your general fund assets are about 44% depreciated. Your enterprise funds are about 50. Okay, the next table on page 42 is a table that shows the debt of the city. Again, governmental and business type, and of the actual debt that you consider in your minds, like loans and bond issues. In the general fund, it is only $264,180, and I think that's a loan that financed this building. And it declined during the year. But then in the business type enterprise fund, it is $2.4 million, and that's with one bond issue now. Both of these have interest rates ranging from 2 to 5%, so it's at fairly good rates. But also, you're required to report the city's liability for compensated absences. In other words, what would it cost you if if you ended operations at the end of the year and accrued leave, and that's about $540,000. Okay, so I would say financially that you had a successful year, that when you put the two funds together, you increase reserves. Okay, as I mentioned, so now I'm going to page 87, 88. As I mentioned, we're required to perform audit procedures under government auditing standards. These go beyond just financial issues and include internal control over financial reporting, compliance with various laws, regulations, terms of grant agreements, and this is our report on those procedures. And in this report, there are no findings or question costs. On page 89 and 90 is the management letter required by rules of the Auditor General of Florida. In these, we include findings, comments that are not significant and material to the financial statements, but areas with which we wish to make the City Council aware. And then we have other issues that we have to address. So always great when there were no reportable findings in the prior year, no reportable findings in the current year. The annual report that's required by Florida statutes is filed electronically, is in agreement with this report. We determined that the city had not met any of the conditions described in Florida statutes that might result in a financial emergency. We did financial condition assessment procedures. I've given you the highlights of those. You had no deteriorating financial conditions. On page 91 is we're recently added several years ago. We're required to perform audit procedures regarding your investment of public funds. We did, and we had no findings regarding those. And as always, we appreciate working with the city, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions of the city council.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to Mr. Lupo on this.
Mr. Powell, I would sincerely like to thank you for the hard work that you've done in putting this product together. And I'm sure the community feels assured and more comfortable with your statements, in particular that there were no exceptions that you found, and that we are moving in a progressive manner and a responsible fiscal manner, and we'll continue to move in that direction. And I thank you again, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the early
Thank you.
time slot, too.
No action required.
You do not need a motion. That's the final order. It just needs to be presented. Thanks, Mr. Powell. You don't need to take any action.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the city financial status report.
Mr. Satchel.
Mr. Schatzel, Pete Schatzel. Sorry, Powell.
Thank you very much. I'm Peter Schatzel with the firm of Wells, Hauser, and Schatzel. We have been financial consultants to the city of Port Richey since approximately 2009. And I'd like to thank the council for giving me the opportunity to make this presentation tonight. What I am presenting is it's a summary of the results of operations for the first 6 months of the city's fiscal year. So I'm covering the period from October 1st, 2018 through March 31st, 2019. And although the report is a lot thinner than the report that Richard just went through with you, there are a lot of numbers in here, and I can appreciate that when you see an Excel worksheet loaded with numbers, your eyes tend to glaze over. And so I'd like to try to take you through this. I encourage questions at any point in time. I can drone on with a very monotone voice, and I welcome any questions that you might have. My presentation covers all of the primary funds of the city, and to compete with the air conditioning.
Yes.
And the format that I use is the first column, moving from the left to the right, is the budget for the entire year. And then to help you compare the actual results of operations, which is the third column, I give you the budgeted amount for a 6-month period, so that you can make a comparison between what you budgeted for revenues and expenditures for 6 months and how much revenue and expenditures you received and incurred during that same time frame. And then the fourth column shows a budget variance, whether you are over budget or under budget. And the second to the last column is taking the actual, in the case of the revenues, comparing the actual revenues for the first 6 months to what you had budgeted for the first 6 months. And so when you look at those percentages, if those percentages are over 100%, that means that you have collected more than what you had budgeted for the first 6 months. Going down to the area where we show the expenditures, if the amount in that percentage column is over 100%, that means that you have expended more than what you have budgeted. And that format I tend to follow through all of the funds. So in looking at the general fund, the first, your main operating fund, the first one that I'm commenting on, for the entire year, you budgeted $5,370,000 of revenues, and you budgeted expenditures totaling $5,822,000. So there was an intentional deficit that was budgeted for the fiscal year 19, and that deficit, which is approximately $452,000. How you were going to make up for that shortfall, so to speak, is that you had sufficient reserves that were being carried forward from the prior year. So it isn't unusual to see, especially in the governmental funds, as Richard explained, the general fund, the CRA fund, and the penny for Pasco, those are governmental funds. And it's not unusual if you have a deficit. That could mean several things, that you feel that you want to spend down some of the reserves that you're carrying forward so that you don't have to increase ad valorem taxes, or you might have some capital projects that are a little bit unusual that are going to be incurred in a current year. So I basically want to explain that although you budget a deficit, that's not intended to be a negative situation. So in looking at the results of the general fund for the first 6 months, the budgeted revenues were $2,685,000, and you took in a total of $2,964,000. So in looking at that initially, that looks great. You exceeded your budgeted revenues for that first 6 months by $279,000. What I have, I've made this presentation to the council about the past 7 or 8 years, and with the general fund, what I like to draw your attention to is that you really you can't look at what you took in for the first 6 months and compare it to the budget for the first 6 months, for the main reason that you collect your ad valorem taxes. You collect them very early on. They're coming in, and they start coming in the month of November and the month of December and January. So the very first line there is the ad valorem taxes. You budgeted $1.56 million, and through the end of March you had taken in almost $1.4 million. So you have collected a good portion of the ad valorem taxes that you will be collecting for the entire year. But when you think about it from an operational standpoint, although you've collected those ad valorem taxes early on, those monies, so to speak, have to last you through the end of the year as a part of funding your operations. So what I do in the very far right-hand column is that for the ad valorem taxes in particular, I show if they were being collected on a lot more of a pro rata time period, and so in other words, if you collected 50% of your ad valorem taxes through March, the first 6 months, that revenue would have been about $785,000. And so the point that I'm coming down to here is, if you look at the far right-hand column for the revenues, looking at it from a 6-month standpoint, you collected $2.3 million, whereas your budget was 50% of your budget is $2,685,000. So you really collected less than what you were anticipating, and where that shortfall comes in. Looking at it is that you budgeted for a lot of grants in 2019 in the general fund. The total grant budget was $873,000. And when you're looking at grants, you can't always predict when they're going to come in. Oftentimes, grant funding is predicated on your spending money. And so through the first 6 months of the year, you didn't collect any of the grants that had been budgeted. So that comparison of your prorated revenues to the 6-month budget, the fact that it's falling short by in excess of $300,000, mainly has to do with the fact that you haven't collected all the grants. Put it another way, they haven't been collected on a pro rata basis. On the expenditure side, excuse me, the six-month budget for expenditures would total $2,911,000, and you expended $2,645,000. So you have a favorable variance of $266,000. Just as you collect your ad valorem taxes up front, there's a requirement, since you have a CRA district, there's a requirement that a payment be made from the general fund to the CRA fund for what it's called TIF, which the TIF is an acronym for tax incremental funding. The city pays all of their TIF money to the CRA basically at the start of the year. So the total paid out was $503,000, which exceeds your 6-month budget because you paid it all out immediately. And so, as I did with the ad valorem taxes, I also did a proration of the TIF funding. What I'm coming down to is in that far right-hand column, when looking at the general fund, it operated at a deficit of about $75,000 for the first 6 months, if you consider the ad valorem taxes coming in on a pro rata basis. You budgeted a deficit for the first 6 months of $225,000. So you're in the general fund. You have operated basically with a $150,000 favorable variance when you compare the amount of the deficit that you anticipated having at the end of March compared to what you actually have. So I know that's a pretty long-winded explanation to get to one number. One of the items that I show on the bottom right-hand corner of that first page, it's always has a bit of interest to council, is how are you doing with the red light cameras? Excuse me. And the red light cameras, the revenues in the first 6 months were $530,000. The amount of service fees that you incurred in the collection of those revenues were $101,000, and the fees that you have to share with the state of Florida were $251,000. So for the first 6 months of the year, the red light camera fees yielded a net positive income of almost $178,000. I will move through the other funds a little bit quicker than I did with the general fund. On the next page, starting off with the CRA fund, and you did have a balanced budget with the CRA fund. The CRA fund really doesn't lend itself to doing a budgetary comparison, and the main reason for that is because there's a lot of capital projects that are anticipated to be paid for out of the CRA fund. And if those capital projects aren't starting right away, the amount that you are expending is going to, from a budgetary standpoint, it's going to look very favorable, but all it means is that you just haven't spent the money yet. But in the CRA fund, for the first 6 months, it took in $1,160,000 and expended $224,000. So there was an excess of money coming in over expenditures of $935,000. If you look at the expenditures, there's a line item for other economic development, and the budget for that was $630,000, and that included dredging, $300,000, road improvements of $275,000, and improvements to Nick's Park of about $25,000. Through the end of March, of that total economic development, there was excuse me, only about $21,000 expended. So it gives the impression that you're operating very favorably, but it's just that those large projects haven't been started yet. If you look at the far right-hand column once again, I have done a proration of the ad valorem taxes and the city's share of the tax incremental funding. Even doing that proration, looking at the CRA fund for that 6 months, you operated at a $364,000 surplus. The next fund, about two-thirds of the way down on that same page, is for having to do with the Penny for Pasco fund. And there was you did budget a deficit in the Penny for Pasco fund of a total of $86,000. And through the first 6 months, you're operating at a break even. You've taken in approximately $220,000, and you've expended $217,000. So it's operated at just a slight surplus of about $2,800. Moving to the next page of the water and sewer utility fund, I'll spend a little bit more time on that fund since it is one of the, other than the general fund, it's really the second largest fund that the city has. And in the water and sewer utility fund, you budgeted total revenues for the year of $3,576,000, and you budgeted expenditures of totaling $3,910,000. So, as you did in the general fund, there was a budgeted deficit in the water and utility fund totaling $333,000. The budgeted revenues for the first 6 months would be, taking 50% of the budget, would be a total of $1,788,000. And in the sale of water and the sewer revenue, there were revenues totaling $1,646,000. So for the first 6 months, you're under budget by about almost $142,000. That shortfall is basically coming primarily from the fact that the amount of sewer revenues are falling short of what had been budgeted. In looking at the expenses, the actual expenses for the first 6 months were a total of $1,857,000, and that compares favorably to the amount budgeted, which was $1,955,000. So there was a favorable variance of about almost $98,000 there. In looking at the actual results, comparing the revenues to the expenditures, there's a deficit of about $210,000, which is about $44,000 more than the amount of the budgeted deficit. One area where there was a budget excess has to do with the amount of the sewer treatment costs, and those sewer treatment expenses were about $203,000 over budget for the first 6 months. So that's probably an area that probably needs to be focused on somewhat as far as attempting to address why those sewage treatment expenses are running over budget. To look at it another way, though, you're not running a serious deficit in the water and sewer fund as compared to what you had budgeted. So I don't mean to sound an alarm, but you are running a slightly larger deficit than what what you had anticipated. The next page is the stormwater utility fund, and it had a balanced budget, and for the first 6 months, the amount of revenues compared to the amount of expenditures, it was operating at a deficit of about $20,000. I won't go into too much further detail on the stormwater utility fund, in that it's not a particularly large fund for the city. The next page, which is a presentation of the city's cash balances, and on the far right-hand side, I go back to March 31st, 2014, and then come across all the way to the current period as of March 31st, 2019. And looking at the city on a government-wide basis, including all of the funds of the city, the total cash on hand at March 31st totaled $7,622,000. If you look at that same time period as of March 31st, 2018, the total cash was an amount of $6,964,000. So there was a favorable increase. If you go back to March 31st, 2014, the total cash totaled, it was just a little bit over $5 million. Going back even further than that, the city's cash balances were less, and a big reason for that is that you had operated for a number of years where you basically were draining your reserves and you were draining your cash. And over the course of approximately the past 8 or 9 years, you've gotten your reserves up to be positive balances. I'll show you that in a minute. But that $7.6 million compared to $5 million, that's not a case of your having aggregated more cash than what you really needed. It's the fact that when you start going back 5 and 10 years, you really didn't have adequate reserves. So you are at a reasonable point now. It's important to note that of that $7.6 million of cash on hand in the bank, a total of $3,332,000 of that can only be spent on restricted or specified purposes. And I've listed those different areas where those cash amounts are restricted. Transportation impact fees, one of the larger amounts of $582,000. The amount in the Penny Pasco fund is about $864,000. So that $7.6 million, if you subtract the restricted monies, there's a total of about $4.3 million of monies that can be spent on general operating purposes. And of that $4.3 million, the amount that's in the general fund totals $2,166,000. So again, I would say that you're in sound financial condition when you look at the cash that's available for general operations. The last schedule that I have presented, it's looking at the fund balances, and this was something that was covered by Richard when he was going through the audit. But what I wanted to point out, in the general fund, at March 31st, 2019, the fund balance in total was almost $2 million. But what you really have to focus on is, in looking at that fund balance, the portion of it that is unrestricted and available for general use, and that is the $1,099,000, almost $1.1 million. Again, going back to around 2009, you didn't have a positive you didn't have a positive number in that unrestricted, undesignated category. It was a negative number. So the city has come a long way in making improvements to its financial condition. And my final comment is looking at the water and sewer utility fund and looking at its unrestricted fund balance at the end of March 2019, that totaled about $1.4 million. The fund balance in total is about $9 million, but of that $9 million, a total of $7 million has been expended on basically all of that fund's infrastructure here. You've got the water treatment plant, all of the you've got miles, basically miles of piping. But again, that the unrestricted available portion of $1.4 million is a very sound amount. It is not an excessive amount by any means. So I hope I was able to share some information that gives you some sense of where the city is as of March 31st. I welcome any questions that you might have, and hope I didn't put the audience totally asleep.
Sure.
How you doing, Ms. Schatzel? We seem to have this conversation once a
Yes.
year, so the city manager and the mayor always let me ask you one, so I've done the budget before. As Mr. Powell said, and I think you've said, the unrestricted reserves, if it was 1.1 and 1.5, about 3 months worth of expenditures, right? And remember, we've had this conversation before, which is a reasonable amount to have in unrestricted reserves, right? You don't want to go any lower, right?
Right, you don't want to go.
Yeah, I was always happy when it was about 6 when I did this 4 years ago, but 3, generally accepted in municipal government, right?
Yes.
Fair statement?
Yes.
And I already knew the answer to that question because we chatted about this before. So looking at what was planned in the budget year that ended September 30th of 2018, the city planned to overspend $451,000. And we planned to do that, and I think to quote you, we had a favorable variance since when you prorated the 6 months, it came to $75,000. So we're not going to overspend that much for the year probably at this pace, correct?
Right. You had budgeted deficit.
Yeah, budgeted
for
deficit will
19.
not end up at 451. It's probably 150 to the good, right? I think that was the number you gave.
No, that 74,828 is a negative.
It's a negative number, I realize, and then presuming we go at the same pace, the negative will be 150, so we'll have overspent 300, right? Most likely.
Right, instead of having overspent by 450,000. you'll
Understood, and we'll probably have a 150 carryover, right? That's where I'm going. So we're gonna probably have a 150 carryover, presuming all things stay the same. So would it be a fair statement that unless we want to get further down that road of unrestricted reserves going down to perhaps a dangerous level, we probably shouldn't have a budget with overexpenditure of that figure, or we're going in the other direction, right? We can't, right? Does that make sense?
Right, and going forward for fiscal year 2020.
Council members, you might want to remember that number. Okay. Thanks, Pete.
Mr. Satchel, I certainly would like to thank you for the diligent work that you've done, and I would like to again point out the difference and the hard work that this community has made in improving its fiscal posture, even from a recent time, from 17 to 19. We made, I believe, significant strides in fiscal responsibility, and I can assure council that during this coming budget process, we will continue in that same vein. And again, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any further questions by council? No. Okay. Thank
Okay
you.
then.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you. Good night.
Are we in
No.
Nope.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is a consideration of bid award for a Gulf River Road or Grand Boulevard sidewalk project.
Ms. Martinez?
Sure. The city has been preparing plans and specifications for a new sidewalk installation project on the east side of the city. That's on the south side of River Gulf Road from Washington Street to Grand Boulevard, and the east side of Grand Boulevard from River Gulf to US 19. We've been planning that since last year, working on the plans and specifications. We budgeted CDBG funding to help pay the costs of this project. CDBG funding is Community Development Block Grant funding that comes from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. And it's money given to local communities to help enhance the communities in any ways the communities see fit. We have applied through Pasco County to use CDB funding to fund this project, and we're approved. We advertised this project through the public bid process in April of this year. We received 4 bids on that project, which you see listed in your agenda packet on page 19. City staff reviewed the bids that were received along with our city engineer and have recommended Augustine Construction, which is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder on this project, for a total project budget of $136,501. We're happy to answer any questions you have about this project, and tonight we are looking for a motion to award the contract to Augustine Construction in amount of $136,501.
The question I had, and I looked through the agenda, is how much was the amount of the grant that we received?
We receive an allocation every single year. We receive about $30,000, and that depends on the year. But we have right now about $156,000 in CDBG grant funding available to use in the city.
We're running about 24,000 under our budgeted amount.
Right.
That's not coming out of that, right? But okay. Are there any other questions by council on this? Are there any motions?
I'd like to make a motion to award the bid to Augustine Construction in the amount of $136,501.
Second.
Are there any reasons for discussion on this before we vote? By the general public? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Consideration of a rotor pump purchase for our Vector truck. Everyone in the city knows what the Vector truck is. It is that huge truck with the big tank on it. It is one of the most important pieces of equipment that the city has. We utilize it for brakes, water brakes, main brakes. We use it to help clean out some of the swales, some of the piping underneath the swales, and we'll be crippled without that single piece of very, very expensive equipment. So we have for city council considerations the purchase of a rotor pump is a part that has to be replaced for the Vector truck in the amount of $16,515. The city acquired the Vector truck model year 2007 and 2009. That is designed to use vacuum technology to load liquids, sludge, or slurry through suction lines. The funding for this purchase will be derived from the Penny for Pasco fund from a sole source vendor, and that is the single issue. And that is because the parts are made by the same Vector truck company. Attached documents and requested a motion to approve the purchase of the rotor pump for the Vector truck in the amount of $16,515.
This time, are there any motions?
Motion to approve purchase of rotor pump for the Vector truck in the amount of $16,515.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The next item up on the agenda is going to be the issue as it relates to former Vice Mayor, Mr. Rowe. I'm going to turn that over.
Yeah, I'll take that. This has been on the agenda before, and I just wanted to add some detail to it. Try to keep this simple. The council has a right to forfeit the seat of any other council member. We briefly discussed the reasons. If council decides they want to do that, after substantial research on the matter, you can do that, and I want to explain what the process would be. You'd first have to bring like a charge. That charge must be somewhat specific, so if it's your intention to bring a charge, for the lack of a better word, because of the behavior of Mr. Rowe with the mayor, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. And if you want to bring that charge, that if you make that decision, I'd need some sort of direction what the charge would be, and it can, general or whatever, and then I would reduce that to a resolution. It would be my recommendation to make it a resolution, because then we need to serve that upon Mr. Rowe, and a process would begin. We'd give him a certain amount of time to enter a defense, and then after that we would proceed with a trial, quasi-judicial hearing. Okay, we'd need a lawyer. I can't do it. Bring somebody in, prosecute the case. And believe me, I'm not trying to dissuade you from it. I'm just telling you what the process is. And after that, you'd make a decision. Mr. Rowe could be present, he might not be present, I don't know. And then what would happen is he would be given an order from the council here that I would prepare, saying your office is forfeited, I would presume, unless, of course, he convinces you not to do it. And then he would have 30 days to appeal to the court. Okay, so it's a lot, it's a mouthful there, but. So if you want to proceed, I'd recommend that kind of briefly set forth the reasons, and I can come back at the next meeting with a resolution if that's what you want to do. I don't think I'm saying anything wrong that the mayor was convicted of the crime of conspiracy on the obstruction charge this afternoon, late this afternoon, as I'm sure everybody's aware, so that's why I gave this lengthy background.
Thank you.
I'll answer any questions for the council.
I'd like to open discussion to the council at this point.
Well, first thing I'd like to do, if it's possible, is possibly get a letter before we add any more expense to this. Give Mr. Rowe one last time, now that the court has come down on Mr. Massett. It probably changes his whole outlook on this, and possibly we give him one more shot by letter with a few days to resign. If that's not the case, I would like to move forward with the motion to follow up with the resolution based on what FDLE and the governor have said for malfeasance and misfeasance for that crime.
And if I may, on my comments, the issue as it presents is one of the issues also of a cost-benefit analysis. And I can tell everybody here from what I do for a living that the cost of litigation is quite extensive. So this would be a cost to the city that wasn't budgeted, that we would have to take into account. And then we also have to look at the benefit if we do that. And obviously the benefit is we get a council seat that's filled, hopefully at a sooner date. The only other thing I'd like to point out is even if we do proceed with the hearing and we expend all the money, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to meet the threshold that he would be removed. There would still be a trial, and it could go either way at a trial. So that was one of the things I wanted to point out as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me just clarify one thing. When I say a trial, it'd be a hearing here. Mr. Rowe would be entitled to be present and set forth his defense. I'm very confident that he will lose that trial here, I would think, right? He then has a right 30 days to appeal it into the court system, which would be slightly different. So the trial is
Well,
not.
that was my reasoning
Yeah.
for giving the opportunity for Mr. Rowe by sending a formal letter from the city. I know because of the court case today, give him the opportunity before we incur the expense to give him more time to resign. And I think we should still put forward the motion to move forward with the resolution in case that he does not resign. That is our next only step as far as I'm concerned.
I'm concerned about what the specific charge it would be. Would it be the malfeasance? You said that we have to have a specific charge
Well,
and then reduce it to a resolution.
Yeah, in other words, you'd have to go to the charter, it's right here, and pretty much make a motion that, you know, it would be the malfeasance and/or violation of the charter, okay? And then give me some statements as for all the reasons that were in the complaint filed with
By the governor and
by the
by-
governor, et cetera.
Okay.
Just so I have a general idea what it is, I don't want to make it up.
So
I
we
mean, I'm
would-
99% sure I know what it is, you know.
But we could be going for the malfeasance, misfeasance.
And
but-
probably a violation of the charter also. There's, if you saw the trial today, you'll see that, you know, using the office for public records and things like that may be a violation of the charter. I'm just kind of want to hear from everyone that it's because of what he did with the mayor. Do you understand what I mean? I could take it from there, prepare a
So was
resolution.
that the motion I made?
Yeah, it was the
is-
motion you
okay.
made, and I just want some other
Okay.
comments on the record, so I'm not making it up.
Yep.
But that's, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a,
Well, then I second the motion to notify Mr. Rowe and then to proceed with notification of forfeiture of Mr. Rowe's council seat.
and just for clarification on the motion, to notify him, I think you're just asking Mr. Lupo to see if he wants to resign.
Give him
Once
the
the
option.
resolution is passed, there'll be a formal notice to him. of resolution.
Exactly.
And I'll bring the resolution back next time for a vote. So you're only asking to prepare the resolution for a vote 2 weeks
Prepare the
from now.
resolution,
And then
correct.
then you'll
We'll
be
vote
down
on
the
it then.
road.
Yep.
That's what the motion.
I understand. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think the motion carries.
Oh, I got it, but I'm just saying, the general public, our rules of etiquette needs say that anytime a motion's made, that he goes back after that.
Okay.
In case they want to, they're fine. Just remind you.
They're good on that.
Go ahead, yeah.
And we have one last agenda, and that's going to be the nomination and appointment of city resident and vacant city council member seat, which would be Dr. Bloom's seat, since he's resigned.
If I could, Mr. Mayor, this on? Is it on? All right, thank
Yep.
you. I think everyone, perhaps the mayor, you've seen this item before. I know the two of you have. What's happening now is Dr. Bloom has resigned his seat as of last week, and there's a special election to fill that seat, and I believe it's September 18th, right, Sal? And so the council
10th.
needs to appoint a temporary interim council member.
I'm sorry.
10th. Yeah.
September 10th, oh, I gave the wrong date, September 10th. For these July, August, September, 6 meetings or whatever. You can pick a person today, you can, just like last time, you could discuss how you want to pick one. I think last time, as the mayor, they decided to have some people come in and talk. That might not be necessary now, so it's your choice. You got to appoint someone. You can appoint him tonight, or you can talk about how you want to appoint him.
Well, my thoughts on it is, we had a great mayoral race, and there were some really good candidates, and I was really happy to see actually 5 people actually coming out and running for that seat. Based on that, and based on, I don't know if a lot of you other got to go to see when they all spoke in the park. I think that was really interesting, and I think you did a really good job there as well. But that also, I think, helped me make a decision again on, I think that would be a great pool to pull from for this temporary seat. And moving forward with that, I think I would like to make a nomination if the mayor is open for that now.
We're open for nominations.
Okay. I'd like to nominate Todd McCleary for that position.
Well, I agree with you 100% that we should go with the people's choice. And the people's choice was made pretty clear, so I'll second that motion.
The only issue or discussion that I'd like to ask, would that preclude him from running for any other positions or offices?
It does not. I've had lengthy conversation with the supervisor elections about that. No, it would not preclude him from running for that seat.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
And he's only going to be temporary until the
Correct.
special election.
Okay.
So
Of
we
which he
got,
can run for.
what,
Correct.
6 meetings that this temporary person will be sitting on?
Yep.
To the budget.
So I think we put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Can we ask him if he'll accept it?
You accept.
I guess that took care of that.
When can we get?
Sal, you'll swear before the next meeting, right?
Yeah. Great.
Any old business?
We've been doing a wonderful job in covering our old business in the last several meetings, so I feel pretty good. Our biggest primary concern was, of course, the water issue and the water billing issue, and I think we've already clarified that. And if anyone has any questions, please let us know. Otherwise, there is no more old business.
Any motions?
And well, one last thing, I'd like to thank the public for turning out again. I feel like that we've turned a page and we're moving in the right direction. So thank you all for sticking through the rough parts. And motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.